Just to give you a heads up, some of the topics we're talking today are of adult content and maybe sensitive in nature. Hello, and welcome to On Deadline. I'm Kendra Nichols.
I'm Dennis Owens.
And I'm Amanda St. Hilaire. Thank you for joining us.
If you're listening for the first time, we are journalists for ABC 27 News in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
But on this podcast, we talk about issues that affect people all over.
That's why these are the conversations you don't hear on the news. We're different generations with different perspectives, so we don't always agree.
But we're getting very personal, getting very real, and hopefully getting you thinking.
We're recording on Monday, November 20th, 2017.
And today we'll meet a Pennsylvania man attempting a Guinness World Record in kickboxing. Now, he was sexually assaulted as a child and has turned that pain into action, pushing the limits of his own body to raise awareness about sexual assault and raise money for programs to help sexual assault victims. Plus, York County Children and Youth Services in the headlines again. Could they have prevented the death of a 3-year-old girl killed in a double murder-suicide? We learned the agency was in the home just weeks before her death. We'll fill you in on what a state inspection reveals about how the agency handled the girl's case. Plus, our favorite part, we'll hear a word from you, what you guys are thinking about our podcast lately. All right, so let's get to that Guinness World Record attempt. On December 2nd at the Carlisle YWCA, Travis Quirin will be attempting the Guinness World Record for the most consecutive rounds sparred in kickboxing. So here's what he has to do, you guys. He has to go about 112 rounds. It's going to be about more than 8 straight hours of sparring. Whew. I'm already tired. I mean, I work 8 hours a day and I'm tired.
Seriously, most people don't box, but if you do it for just a round or two, it's exhausting.
Yes.
112?
So, yeah.
I have to go over 111.
111.
So 112.
To get the record.
Yeah.
And that's Travis talking here. Now, this is an event that you're calling Kickboxing for Compassion. It's your 4th record attempt in 5 years, and you do attempt records like this to raise money for sexual assault victims, something that is close to your heart. So how are you feeling about this attempt?
I'm good, especially after this past weekend. I was having an asthma attack pretty much all week. My breathing wasn't right, but went in, did 51 rounds, had better sparring partners this time, dislocated my toe, like, what did I say, 10th round? Yeah. 10th round, just pushed it back in, continued that round.
And you dislocated it from kicking someone?
Yeah, I was actually my wife. Kicked my wife. She was one of my sparring partners.
I was going to say, she volunteered to
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. So she kept coming at me, and I just kind of, something didn't feel right. So I popped it back in, because I'm not going to be able to stop day of the record. So popped it back in, continued. Then she worked my corner, taped it up, and that was it.
Wow.
Like the rest of
Well, we should have mentioned also here, Patrick Andrews, he's with our lifestyle show, ABC 27's lifestyle show, Good Day PA, and he's the one that introduced us to you. So you guys already know each other pretty well.
Yes.
Yeah, I know Travis pretty well. My brother passed away from cancer in 2015, and one of his best friends was Travis, and he would always tell me to come home. He'd worked out with Travis quite a bit, and he would always tell me, this guy's a beast. This guy's a beast. Lifting with him is incredibly difficult, and he would, and I would say, yeah, you kind of believe with your siblings, you're like, yeah, whatever, And then I finally met Travis. I said, he doesn't look like he can lift incredible amounts of weight, but he can. He's just compact, he's strong, and so then I started reading about him this year, more of his records, and I thought, this is a really great story, and I want to.
And I don't know what you're looking at, but I think he does look like he can lift.
He does.
I've lost since about 6 months ago. I'm down like 40 pounds, just from
all the
trying to get in shape. In better shape. I mean, I was a lot stronger then, but I had to get in better shape to be able to go that long.
So you're attempting this, you've made other record attempts, and you've been able to raise money for sexual assault victims. Can you explain why this is something you're so passionate about and why it's so important to you?
I just never had the help that I needed when I was younger. Again, I don't blame anybody for that. Maybe there wasn't enough support there that there is. The resources weren't there. But just getting the word out. I mean, if it's money, if it's just the awareness and people being aware of it, I find that whenever I tell people, and I'm raising money for this, the women will say to me, that's great what you're doing, and the guys seem to focus more on the event that I'm doing. But as we get to talk, then they see what I'm doing it for as a whole, other than, yes, it's going to be fun and entertaining for me to do the kickboxing and whatever it is. But to see that I'm a man that went through that, and it does make a big difference, I think.
And that's key, because when we talk about men and sexual assault, there's a whole other stigma and a whole other set of complications that comes up when we're talking about men speaking about their experiences. So what's been your experience with that? Because you're a big, strong guy, and I think that's part of what resonates with people too when we talk about sexual assault.
Yeah. I think everybody thinks that since I look this way, I've always been, nothing's ever happened to me. Everything bounces off me. Even my wife and our clients, they'll see me do something and they just think that bullets bounce off me, but they don't see when I'm home and my knee hurts or, whatever, or if I'm having an emotional day with, talking about what the record I'm doing or whatever, or the dreams I have. So I mean, I'm human, and that's what a lot of people don't see all the time.
And Patrick, you get more into his story and what happened with the story that you're going to be airing on Good Day PA.
Yeah. It's, and Travis's story, unfortunately, he was 6 and his brother was 9. And, it's a tragic story. And it's one, people ask me recently with all the sexual harassment stuff and all these stories of, past rapes and that are in the news. People say, well, did you time up? I couldn't time up this story with that. It just seems so perfectly timed to talk about this. And a lot of what you're seeing is women saying, me too, and this happened to me when I was younger. But really, I mean, Travis, he was a young boy, and it also happened by a stranger, which is, typically you hear friends and family or somebody that has access. They approached Travis and his brother. This man approached Travis and his brother. He's in his late 20s. When he lived in Altoona and took them somewhere and sexually assaulted them. So it's kind of like the story is just, it is a tragic one. It's sad, but to see the triumph that he's been able to make out of that is really encouraging. And I think Travis, and some of you listening to this, you can't really see him. He's got tattoos everywhere.
He looks tough.
He looks like a bad
kickboxer.
Right. He looks like a bad dude, in the good sense. But like he really, he doesn't look like, sometimes what you think somebody that underwent, underwent that looks like. And he really breaks the mold there. And yeah, so I'm just very happy he's telling a story, because it's a tough one to tell. And I don't think a lot of people, they understand the kind of trauma. I mean, some of the things he's talked to me about, they're PTSD moments. They're sitting there thinking about it, and yeah. One of the things I'll say real quick is that Travis, when we went out to the pizza grill to discuss the story before I started it, because unlike you guys, I do about a story a year. So, and I pull in my friend Andy, who's a cinematographer from New York City, and I also, one of my coworkers, Jason, does the music. And we sat at the pizza grill, and he's telling me his story, and a lot of, I asked him, I said, how has it changed you? How has it changed you? And he said he actually went on a whole thing, almost Sherlockian, where he told me what everybody was doing behind him. That this guy had stood up 4 times to go to the bathroom, and he's telling me all these other patrons of the restaurant. He's always watching. That would happen to be 30 minutes of time changed his life forever.
Right.
And now he was telling me he sits a certain way so he can see the doors. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal that he's, I think one of the things you told me was that
tiring.
It's tiring.
It sounds mentally exhausting.
Yeah, very tiring. Huh. Yep.
And it sounds like to a certain degree there's some self-sacrifice involved in what you do, right? Because that has to be emotionally draining, kind of talking about your experience and raising awareness about this thing that happened to you. It's a great cause, but that's part of yourself that you're giving too. And I'm sure a lot of people don't realize that.
They don't, and it's okay that they don't. If we, if they don't, if we raise, look, if my goal is to raise $10,000 and they don't see, and they never see the pain I go through, whatever, which they don't, I'm fine with that. It's not, I don't mind going through anything emotional, anything physical, as long as when I see what the money goes towards and how long it funds the groups for, I'm fine with that. My wounds will heal. My toes back in place.
Just pop right back in there.
What happened to your wife when you kicked her?
She kept coming towards me. She was okay. I kicked her in the stomach, but I hit part of her elbow, so that's where my toe kind of folded back and over. So I said, hold on, I dislocated my toe, pushed it down, and I said, all right, finish the round. And she started punching me in the face.
I like how that's your question, Dennis.
I think that sounds like good therapy.
I want to go back
couples.
to how do you channel? Obviously, something bad happened to you. How do you channel that, and how long did that take for you to channel that into positive instead of negative?
Because of course I channeled it wrong as a teenager. Early drinking, fighting, just anything I could do wrong that I knew was wrong, I would do. Now, if I would have done that anyways, I don't know, probably. But it took me a while. It's a good thing that I started them I think I was 20. No, I might have been 30 when I did my first one. But I think it took that long for me to grow up and be more selfless. So it took me that long. I would have never probably done anything a long time ago unless it was for myself.
It's a person that did this. Were they ever brought to justice?
They were
arrested, and are they behind bars? Was there some?
I was keeping up with it for a while because I had bad intentions. Was why I was keeping up with him. So he was in jail for a while. I remember whenever he first went to jail, they said I'd be 18 when he got out, and I remember thinking how much bigger I would be then. But then, of course, time goes by. I know he got out. And then I think and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he did it again, or he tried to do the same thing again.
He was imprisoned again. Right?
Yeah, okay, yeah. But then I believe he tried again. I believe I looked up a news article. He tried again with a friend of his, but they didn't believe him, or they didn't believe the daughter, I'm sorry. So he was not arrested. I believe I read something like that, but... So he was brought to justice.
It is a scary thing, though. I mean, looking back on this guy's record, he the man that did things to Travis and his brother. One of the things that was a little scary was in 81 and 83, he went to jail and had probation time for doing the same things to other little kids. Before Travis. Travis and his brother, it happened in 88. And he had just, I don't know exactly the time, but he had gotten out of prison, and then unfortunately, and these are the known victims. That's the worst part. And then when he got out again, there was, I believe it was an indecent assault against him with a little girl in 2009. And so it's just, I think that really does. I mean, we talked about it a lot. I mean, that bothers Travis. I mean, that bothers him a lot. That these guys get out. And he wishes probably that he could take them in a few rounds of sparring, I'm sure.
It wouldn't be a round.
It wouldn't be a round.
No, it'd be, unless I wanted it to be. Yes, but I agree with you.
Travis, what do you say to the listeners that may have experienced something like this, and you admit you had that anger and you wanted the revenge, I'm sure.
Yeah.
What do you say to the other people that are listening? What do you do with those emotions? For you, obviously, it was this, turning
right.
into how can you help them do that as well?
As a kid, you wouldn't know how to do that. So I mean, just make sure your parents know, and get the help you need. Just know that you need help. It's not your fault. There's so many more avenues out there now, and just you got to get help one way or another.
Got to talk about
it. You have to, or else it'll eat you up. I mean, mentally. But I've just been speaking with my wife recently. Some of the injuries I have, the headaches I get, maybe the tics I get, is possibly from the mental stress coming out physically. Mm-hmm. She just told me eventually with stress it's going to come out that way. And now that I'm not old by any means, but now that I'm getting older, I think that I want to definitely get better help for myself and for my daughter, for my family. So So just talk about it. Make sure you talk about it, and know that it's not your fault, and keep at it. Try to stay positive.
You talk about getting help in a little earlier. You mentioned making sure the right resources are available. What kinds of resources do you think should be available, or are you hoping become available if they're not accessible right now?
That's a good question. I don't know all the resources that are out there, but just I think the only resource will be talking about it. I mean, I can do everything physical in the world, but it still doesn't take away memories. It still doesn't help me cope with the memories that I have, like Patrick said, with kind of being alert all the time, and it gets exhausting. Maybe that will go away, maybe not, but I definitely need help for that. I need to talk to somebody. So just a professional that knows more about how to deal with the mentality of a day-to-day like that.
Now you do raise money, and that money goes. PCAR was one of them, I believe. That money goes to some of the places. Talk to
Coalition Against Rape.
Yeah, they had a Vision of Hope fund that it got funneled down to. So it's more specifically not just sexual assault survivors; it's the children. And then they told us about the Y. They had a boys group at the YWCA of boys that were survivors. So we did the second record I did was specifically for that boys group. We raised enough money so that group was to run for 2 years.
Awesome.
We went in and we met all the boys. I think it's a big difference, I think, to have help year round versus just 3 months and then nothing. It's like school. It's like going to school. You forget. You just relearn everything in the next, couple months that you learned the last year. So if you can get it steady, throughout the year, I think that's a big difference. It's just continual help.
Patrick, what's your big takeaway from this, and when will we see this story, by the way?
Well, you're going to see it. Excuse me. My voice is a crack in there. We're going to see it December 1st on Good Day PA, which is the lifestyle show on ABC 27.
12:30.
Yeah, 12:30. Yep. And my big takeaway is, first of all, I just love that people like Travis have come out and started talking about this. We're in a society where people aren't believing the victims, and that's a huge issue. And Travis is proof that these things that happen, like for instance, I'll give you guys a little interesting little tidbit that Travis, he didn't know, because he was 6 years old, he didn't know the exact timing of what took place, and he told me originally it was all day. It was all day. I look at the actual criminal complaint. It was 30 minutes. I mean, people don't realize that that trauma that was 30 minutes felt like it was a day. And we need people like Travis to come out and talk about it and put it into a, good, healthy actions. And I'm really proud of him for doing that. I mean, it's something to take away from that. Yeah, and honestly, I can't wait for him to break the record. Right. I believe him. I did a round of sparring with him.
Are you serious?
I didn't see that in the edit.
I didn't. It wasn't in the edit. It wasn't in the edit. But I do plan on showing it on Good Day PA in a couple different places.
Yeah.
Because it was exhausting.
I'm sure.
He what's great about Travis, it's kind of therapeutic, is that he'll say, okay, I need a break, so he'll let you just kind of punch him for a good minute, and you're just going at him, and then you're exhausted. And I looked over at the clock, and it still had 2 minutes left, and I thought, so his wife Mary Beth is way better of a partner than I am, but and actually when I was in there with you, he said, I'm not gonna, because I didn't have I had headgear on and I had gloves on, but I didn't have a mouthpiece. And Travis said, I'm not going to hit you in the face. And I said, well, that's how I make my money. So please don't do that. And he actually, I did, I'm not a boxer, so I put my head down at one point.
You came low.
Yeah, and he punched towards my stomach, and he hit my jaw. Probably at, what would you think you punched me at? Like a percentage?
30%.
30%. And my whole jaw started tingling. I thought he broke my jaw. I really did. And I thought, man, why did I do this?
Affect our friendship.
But he's the real deal. He's the real deal as a person.
So you're going to do 112 rounds.
112.
And who's going to be? You're going to have a steady stream of people.
Yeah, I have. We're flying in a guy that used to be in UFC, legend, Hall of Famer, Frank Trigg, who's had fights with George St. Pierre, Matt Hughes. I don't know if you've ever heard of these guys.
I have not.
Okay. So he's well known in the MMA community. He's coming in with his wife from Hawaii, Charlie Brenneman, who used to be in UFC as well. He's from Harrisburg. He's coming over. And then I just have my friends that have fought, sparring partners coming in. My wife will do some rounds.
Can people pay to watch? Is there like an entrance fee to come in and watch?
There's no entrance fee.
Okay.
There's going to, donate. There's going to be
Yeah.
various forms. We're going to have silent auction. We're going to have bake sale. A lot of different donation, buckets, whatever. So there's going to be many ways to donate.
So if people want to come to the Carlisle YWCA on December 2nd, they'll get to see you doing this record attempt. There'll be ways to donate to the cause.
Mm-hmm.
What time does it start?
10
10
a.m.
10
Yep,
a.m.?
10 a.m. Till about 6 p.m.
That's like
So
about
they
8
can-
hours.
Yeah.
Yes.
One thing we wanted to make clear is it's kind of like an open house.
Okay.
People obviously don't have to
Yes,
stay there and watch him.
Yeah.
You just kind of
That's
slip.
quite the commitment.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You just kind of slip by.
Give 'em a little go,
Yeah, you
go,
could
yeah.
give them a little go. And one thing that's really cool is like in the past, victims of sexual assault had actually cheered Travis on in the background.
Oh,
and I know that means a lot to him.
Yeah.
And so, if you are out there and maybe you have a story that no one knows and you don't necessarily have to tell it, come by and cheer Travis on because, he's fighting for you guys. So, but yeah.
That's awesome. All right, you're geared up. What do you do the night before you go for something like this?
I actually get more calm
Yeah?
when it becomes time. I like the more people, the better.
Oh, really?
So I get more calm when it cuts closer to the event. As long as I know that everything's taken care of, like if family's coming in, silent auction items, baked. As long as everything's good for the venue,
and you can focus.
I'm good to go. Yeah. But yeah, we have a massage table in our living room. That my wife, that my wife. So we make that probably every other day. She gives me a massage on.
That's
So she
nice.
punches you in the face and then
And then
massages.
massage.
Yeah, she's like, it's
That
like a
sounds
sour.
great. Focused on this part
She's
of the
like a
story,
Sour
Dennis.
Patch Kid. She's sweet and sour, just like that.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, but I'm gonna train just the same until probably a couple days before. Just a lot of. I'm still strong. I'm still bench pressing over 400. I can still squat 450 for deadlift. I'm still strong, so I'm doing that. I'm doing everything I can. Cardio, different ways, biking.
I'm sure it's mental and physical.
Absolutely, yeah.
What's the most rounds you've done so far?
51.
So that's the most you've done. You're
That's the
gonna
most
try to
I've
double
done.
that.
Yeah. I didn't want to peak too soon and do and put myself in at risk of injury. But this was Saturday. We did 51, and it was the best training so far, but it was also the hardest. I'm pretty beat up. I feel like I have golf balls in my legs from getting kicked that many times. But I mean, it'll go away. I'll be ready.
When you're doing something like this, when you're training, when you're trying to break a record, are you letting the emotion behind the message you're spreading channel through you, or is that something you're kind of putting to the side?
A little of both. When I did the hour records, I use it whenever I start to when it's most painful. I use that. But for 8 hours, I don't want to have a big adrenaline dump.
Yeah.
I don't want to kind of get too worked up, and then after an hour in, so I'm definitely going to have to not really think about it. Pace myself a little bit.
For the people who listen to this, for the people who end up watching Patrick's story about your efforts, or even watching your record-breaking efforts on the day of, if they walk away with one thing, what do you want them to know?
Just being more comfortable to talk about it. And knowing how much help there is out there.
Do you have a goal in mind how much you want to raise?
10,000.
10,000.
Yeah.
I think we may have mentioned
Yep.
that. Okay.
Yeah, and in his previous attempts, he's raised like around 10,000 together. So this would be all those attempts in one, and I think it's totally doable. And he's excited. I'm excited.
Is it Guinness Book? Is this an official attempt? I know that costs money, so I don't know.
So there was the tire flip record that was through a World Record Academy, and we hit them up, and they wanted like $6,000.
Did you guys realize that to set those records, you actually have to pay for somebody to be there?
Yeah, it's like $10,000. You have to fly them from London, and it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Now, so what we are going to do is we're going to, as long as we videotape it, and they give me a packet of kind of rules to follow. So as long as I have certain witnesses there, they're experts in certain fields. We do videotape the whole thing.
And then submit it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is through Guinness. So, yep.
Exciting. We're rooting for you.
Thank you.
Well, we'll have to swing by with some signs.
There we go.
All right. So in case you missed it, the story will air on December 1st on Good Day, PA. That's on ABC 27 at 12:30. The very next day, December 2nd, at the Carlisle YWCA, Travis will be attempting a Guinness World Record, at least 112 rounds sparring kickboxing, and they're accepting donations. All of those donations will help victims of sexual assault.
I left out, we did do a GoFundMe. Go on to GoFundMe.com and you put in kickboxing for compassion. You'll see my face. Click on it and donate. You can donate that way.
He's got a beard and a bald head and tattoos, since you guys can't see him. Travis and Patrick, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on, we're going to talk about York County children and youth. The ABC 27 investigators already revealed that the agency is facing a federal lawsuit for allegedly placing a child with a known pedophile. Now, Dennis, you ran that story. Fill everybody in on that.
So basically, there was a custody issue, and York Children and Youth put a child in the home of a guy who had previously been convicted of abusing, and according to the allegations, he did it again. And not just allegations, I think it's conviction actually at this point. He did it again. He's back in prison. But, you know, they basically, one of the basic things before you place a child is any adults in the building have any background here? And apparently somehow that got overlooked, and he was put and placed into a home with what should have been a known abuser, and that person abused again.
Do we know if they did the necessary background checks, whether they just skipped that step or if they did it and just kind of shrugged their shoulders?
Well, we don't, because they're not commenting, because it's now a federal lawsuit, so they're not commenting.
And they usually say we're not going to talk about individual cases.
And they're not going to talk about individual cases. Both of those things are correct. But the evidence seems pretty clear, is that they did put him in a home of a person who is a previous abuser, who's been convicted of abusing the boy that they put into the home. And
then just a few weeks after your story ran,
yes.
We get word that York County Children and Youth was involved in a case that ended in a death. Now, there was a double murder-suicide in Manchester Township, York County, back in April. 3-year-old Kelly Williams was killed. Police say this was a pact between Kelly's dad, Frankie, and Kelly's grandmother, Tammy. So it's confusing, but Tammy is Frankie's mom. So we find out that they were in the home just weeks before she was killed. And
they being CYS.
CYS, yes. And according to a state inspection, they made mistakes. Things
what?
Listed in the inspection, they were called to the home. They never left the living room to inspect the home. Some of the allegations were the living conditions, physical abuse, things like that. So according to the state inspection, the agent, I guess, or the caseworker, I should say, that never left the living room, never interviewed Kelly to find out if any of these things were happening. One of the complaints was that there was drug use in the home. Frankie and Tammy refused to take drug tests. The agency never followed up and said, hey, look, we need to clear this up. And then the fourth thing that they were, cited for is that when Kelly's mom left the home, had reported that she was being physically abused. They never followed up to see if those allegations were true. The state said they made mistakes. They are now implementing changes. They're now requiring...
The state said that York CYS made mistakes,
yes.
Or the state said the state made mistakes?
Well...
That's a good question, Dennis. How do we say that?
That's a nuanced question.
Isn't it? So they're now requiring the caseworkers to go through training again.
Which has been an issue for years. We've reported. All three of us have reported on this problem.
Yeah, they were on a provisional license just last year. They just got their license back.
They got back. So I mean, the feeling was, everything's hunky dory, but apparently the evidence is suggesting otherwise.
And now we have 2 cases coming out like this.
And when we're talking about this widespread, right? Because we've covered issues in other counties with their children and youth. A lot of times you're talking about burnt out caseworkers who have an increasing caseload. We know that reports to children and youth are up following some of the laws that were passed in the wake of the Jerry Sandusky scandal. So good news that more things are getting reported. But when you don't have additional resources to handle those reports, you have the same amount of people handling more cases. The people who come into the field that are younger and more full of energy are also less experienced.
Right. Well, that's why the Auditor General Eugene De Pasquale just did a State of the Child in which he talked about, he talked about the youth, and they're not trained well enough, they're not paid well enough to keep the good people.
You're required to have higher education that is becoming more and more expensive. You're not getting paid very well at all. And a lot of times it sounds like the work environment is maybe not the healthiest or most organized.
Having said that, it seems just in our reporting, and that's just a very, very small snapshot of what's going on across our area here. You remember the Jared Tutko case, and the problem there was nobody bothered to go upstairs and see that he was in a virtual dungeon, and now we're hearing the same thing. It continues to happen.
And Dennis, I was in that home, and when you were in the first floor of Jared Tutko's home, it looked like any other house. You went up 1 floor to his room, and it was a whole different world. So all it would have taken was somebody walking up the stairs and going to his room and seeing what he lived in. It was feces covered, the walls, the floor covered. I mean, it was bizarre. And there literally was a curtain when you went up the stairs. They had a curtain. Do you remember that? They had a curtain, and you pulled the curtain back, and it was just like it was a different world. So it's bizarre to me, and I understand the overworked, and I hear that. I hear that from people who are in it and working.
I doubt anyone's going into it with nefarious intentions. A lot of these people are working their behinds.
Yeah, nobody wants kids to get harmed. I think that's fair.
No, and I don't believe that they want that at all. But when you're on the outside looking in, you're thinking, you didn't bother to walk through the house? I mean, really? I know it's easy to say that from the outside. There's clearly problems here, though. This is ongoing, and there's many stories that we don't get to do because the agency, whether it's Dauphin County, York County, they won't talk, and they can hide behind, they can hide behind the law saying we can't talk about specific cases, so we can't ask them about certain things.
Yeah, but you can talk about your general procedures and how your department runs without talking about specific cases, because these are tax dollars, and taxpayers deserve to know, and not only tax dollars, the safety of our children.
Well, right, and it's not an insignificant amount of money, and it's not far from where we are, where they train these people.
Right. So the question is it just about training? Because that seems to be the answer, right? Retraining every time we're going to retrain. But it sounds like the issue is a lot deeper if we're talking about dysfunctional work environments. So where do we go from here?
Right, and isn't one of the recurring issues of a manager, because the way these things work is the caseworker, even if they're young, goes out and does notes and has a report, and it's the middle manager that's supposed to be able to, put those in relation of, boy, we need to react to this one now, or this one has a little more time, and that there seems to be a breakdown in that level as well.
That was one of the things they just changed in this. One of the corrective actions they were taking is now supervisors or managers must review a caseworker's notes within 11 days. So they must not have been.
That sounds like a long time. If there's something really bad.
But when you have a lot of cases, how do you keep up with that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's there clearly is a problem here, and it's not just York County. No. We the investigators get calls at one point weekly from people who had complaints. It's hard for us to look into some of these things again because children and youth won't speak
State
to us.
Law,
so
they can't
it's hard for us to do a story on every case that comes in.
But we can keep talking.
Yes, we can.
Well, and again, I do want to stress, and maybe it's time to put the pressure on more with these agencies. can talk about your general procedures and how you are operating and the changes you are making without talking about specific cases. And not only can you do that, you owe it to the people who are funding you and to these children you are protecting to give those answers and to sit down. So that's why it frustrates me when we do these kinds of stories and different agencies want to give us a long statement that says nothing and not actually answer our questions in general about how the procedures work. I don't think there's any excuse for that.
Well, it's a total lack of transparency, and it only furthers the public's view of them. It's the same with Jared Tutko. The only reason they went on camera with ABC 27 is because I got a letter from the mom that proved that they had been in the home the month before.
And for people who may not be familiar with the Jared Tutko case, can you give us the Cliff Notes
version
of that?
I believe it was Green Street in Harrisburg. There was a child that he died, and the family didn't report it for several days. And it was...
He was like grossly underweight.
Oh, my God. He had Fragile X syndrome, I believe, and they weren't feeding him, and he only weighed, I think it was like under 30 pounds.
And his sister was harmed as well.
Yes. So, and... It rocked the city, really.
Yeah.
I mean, people were walking by that home every day and didn't know that this kid was in there suffering like this. And then the mother let us into the home. We saw the horrific conditions, and she happened to mention to me that she had children and youth were there. And I said, do you have any do you have a letter? She showed me a letter that they were in the home 1 month before this kid died. He died a slow death. I mean, this is a slow starvation. I mean, this kid didn't die overnight. And I think
it's got to be obvious that somebody didn't see the child, right? They didn't
Right.
actually see the child that they're there to talk about.
No, never. I never went into the room. And I think that was the outrage. There was a lot of people angry. But Amanda, if we didn't have that letter, because we kept reaching out to children and youth, you need to respond, they weren't going to go on camera until I said, we got this letter from the mom who it proves they were there the month before. Then they went on camera. But why does it take that? Why do we have to? Why do they?
Right, because we're not asking questions for our own benefit.
Right.
It's because when you are a public agency that runs on public dollars and you are charged with this extremely important task, you need to be able to answer questions about how you work, and people need to be able to take a look at that. It's not just about money; it's about safety.
I also think there's a problem as I cover the state. I'm not comfortable with the relationship between the state and the county agencies. That there's discrepancies in the way various counties do it. The state will just say, "Well, that's not us. It's incumbent upon the counties to be dealing with that," and yet the state has oversight, quote unquote. So it's just there's a weird lack of control or lack of. I mean, there should be some basic rules of engagement in this thing that the state puts down that they all follow. That there's not discrepancies from county to county. It seemed to me, and it's just the relationship is odd to me, and I don't think it's the most efficient way to do it.
Well, and the thing, we all acknowledge, well, most believe that there's a problem with these agencies. Like you said, it also comes down to money. So right. Are the taxpayers willing to say, okay, are we going to readjust how we're using our money? Or are we going to...
If you can guarantee to me that money is going to go to the salaries of people who are working these cases or toward hiring more people to help with the caseload, go ahead, raise my taxes. But if it's an allocation of money issue, and that's, I think, something that we're going to be looking into as well. So I think we're going to have many more stories to come.
And most of the police officers I talk to who have to work with a lot of these caseworkers will tell you they often feel bad for them because they are overworked and they have a lot of cases, and they feel like, as we said, they don't go into this with bad intentions.
Correct. And oftentimes they're seeing the worst of the worst that society has, and they're in terrible situations, and they're not quite prepared to, sometimes dangerous situations that they're going in there without being armed or the proper defenses or the proper experience.
Well, I mean, it's something we're definitely going to stay on top of. Is there any timeline on the federal lawsuit? Do you have any idea of when something?
I don't know that.
You never know with those things. But we'll certainly keep on top of it. The big question here, too, is will we see a change in York County Children and Youth License again? They just got it back. We've already got two big things hitting the headlines, so we'll see what happens as we get into the future. All right, Lex, let's hear a word from you. What's everybody saying about us this week.
Well, we're getting still many comments about our episode on the Me Too movement, raising awareness about sexual assault, sexual harassment in the workplace. And this is a really interesting combination because we have Deborah writing in saying, if I were a male and wanted to date in this day and age, I would have a contract written up and it would be signed on the dotted line. I believe in protecting people against sexual assault, but if I say yes, how is a man supposed to know that really means no? And Deborah basically went on to say that a man can get accused of anything and not really be able to do anything about it and could have his reputation ruined.
I did a story several years ago where I forget who it was. Somebody kind of well-known had told her son, get the girl to text you yes. Her son was going off to college, and her answer, she said, son, if you find yourself in a situation where you think you're going to become intimate with a woman, you have her text yes to you. And it's the same. I mean, as a mom, I get where she was thinking she's trying to protect her son, but other people are like, that is so strange and bizarre. But it's kind of the same thing. She's saying guys are going to have a contract saying, yes, are we going to do this?
Well, it gets into the question of what is consent. Now, some of it, and we've been talking about, the comedian Louis C.K. who was, masturbating in front of people and asking if he could masturbate in workplace scenarios. Hopefully no one needs to tell you that is inappropriate workplace behavior. So some of it, I would hope, is common sense. But Aaron, he jumped in and said, if you are in a position of power over somebody, your advances are subject to increased scrutiny. It's the same reason a prison guard can't have a consensual relationship with a prisoner. The prison guard can use the prisoner's refusal against them, making it impossible for the prisoner to give true, full consent. The same dynamic applies to a teacher and student. In any case, may I masturbate is not a question you ask a coworker. Go get a job at any corporation and ask your coworkers to watch you masturbate and see how that works out. If you are interested in your coworkers sexually or romantically, there are appropriate ways to express that interest.
I agree. I mean, I hear what they're saying. This whole movement and everything that's coming out with it, it's been interesting to watch. It sparks a lot of thoughts, but I don't think it's going to end anytime soon.
I don't think it is, and I hope it doesn't. I get worried when I hear people kind of writing things off as more people come forward with stories about it being mass hysteria. And of course, I would hope that anyone coming forward with the claim is speaking truthfully. We do have to acknowledge that there are claims that are made that are false, as happens with any crime. But more people coming forward now doesn't necessarily mean it's mass hysteria. It's that there's safety in numbers. And the more, it's just like when we do a story about something and suddenly we get lots of calls from
Which
people
we always do.
About their own stories because they see, hey, someone's taking this seriously. Maybe now I'll be believed. Maybe now it's safer for me to come forward now that this other person has paved the way.
Right.
And so I really want to make sure we don't get those things confused because then I think we're really ignoring the larger issue here. And just because a behavior was accepted for so many years and is now falling under more scrutiny, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. And it's not just about men. There are women who sexually harass as well. But I think overwhelmingly we see that it's women who are coming forward with these stories, and we can't ignore that.
I did have a really good guy friend the other day say, am I allowed to give you a hug? I'm like, yes, it's okay. Because we were talking about the whole
But
thing.
when in doubt, ask. I think that's a good rule in general.
Well, it's funny. Actually, I don't even know her name, but it's an acquaintance at the Capitol. I see her a lot. She always has a big smile on her face. And I said, oh, you look great today. And then I stopped and said, am I allowed to say that?
I guess it depends on the person, but I don't think that's...
She said, absolutely.
No, I mean, that's saying you look great today or you look nice today is way different than...
Then may I masturbate?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. We're definitely going to need to put a warning at the beginning of this episode.
For the record, I didn't say the M word.
No, Dennis is sitting here very quietly.
Yeah.
But again, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I get that now, men will be questioning, can I say this? Can't I say this? Maybe that's not a bad thing. In the same way that women, we have to question, is it okay if I do this dinner meeting with this man one-on-one? Is that going to be okay? Is that going to be appropriate? If I do that, is it bad or not bad if I order a drink? Like, there are a lot of things that we need to question about our own interactions, whether we're being too flirtatious. And, you know, hey, men, now you got to do that too. I don't know that that's necessarily bad.
All right, we'll keep the comments coming. If you'd like to check out the links to the stories, articles, and videos we discussed, you can find them in our show notes on our website, abc27.com. To get On Deadline delivered directly to your phone, tablet, or computer each week, subscribe in iTunes or Google Play Music. Please take a few minutes and leave us a review in iTunes. We definitely do read them, and your thoughts help us figure out what we're doing well and what we can improve. If you have any news tips or questions for the ABC 27 investigators or topics you would like us to discuss during our weekly podcast, please send us a message on the ABC 27 Investigators Facebook page. Thank you, Eric Semmel, for producing this podcast, and Jason Dietz for composing and recording the music. It's time for us to go. We're on deadline.